By the authority vested in me by the Senate of York University, I hereby confer on you the Doctor of Laws, the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa emittote ad gradum.
Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, especially this part of the class of 2010, I am pleased and honored to be here speaking to you. The motto of York University, as you can tell, as you've been told, as you've probably not thought twice about till now, is Tentanda via, the way must be tried. It's from a passage in Virgil's Georgics, a treatise on farming. That's a subject that was very popular in Rome, and it's certainly appropriate for this university, whose Kiel campus was started in farmland. The third section of Virgil's work begins with a great and glorious introduction about how there is a way that the poet must try, our Tentanda via, in order to produce marvelous verse, describing and praising the gods and the great athletes, the warriors, the wonderful temples, statues, all the glories of the age. Then the main part of the section begins, and it is about breeding stock. The best shaped cow, I'm quoting now, well, translation, is fierce, her head ugly, with plenty of neck, dewlaps are desirable. You want me to take that too?
No, I'll hold it for you.
And shaggy ears. I'll leave it to you to decide if you are more like the poet, the mighty achievers of the ancient world, or their splendid horses and oxen. All are very good models for you, I think. Really, we have no idea what will happen to you next. Yeah, that'd be great. It's very agreeable to get an honorary degree and be waited on like this. Well, we don't know what will happen to you. It's a far different world than it was in 1965 when I came to Canada, or 1955 when I graduated from Cornell University. When I began at York in the early days, the way was untried, unclear, but we had great hopes and considerable resources. I remember that after our department hired one man, his brother came to visit, also a political scientist, also very bright and also job hunting. We didn't have a position for him, but we stockpiled him, and he did very well at York. We could not have imagined the difficulties that faced this class of 2010. The financial crisis, their consequences in terms of jobs that you must be very aware of, climate change issues from oil spills on up and down, the rise of terrorist threats, I could go on. But neither could we then have imagined this admirable multiversity that York is. And York's unforeseen successes can be an encouragement for us all. The general advice I'd have for you is this: keep thinking, keep learning. But in addition, I want to give you something more specific in the form of some useful things I was told when I started university teaching. Some of you will become teachers. All of you can use them. My father was also a university professor, and he gave me 3 pieces of advice when I, as it were, went into the family business, though I have to tell you, at a different university. Okay. The first point was about chalk. You know that awful noise it can make on blackboards? Well, if you break a new piece in 2 before you use it, it won't squeak. Really? Now, I don't know, does anyone still use chalk? What this piece of advice means, though, is know your tools. And perhaps it corresponds now to something like locate and test the plugs and the sockets before you have to give a presentation. The second piece of advice was about clothing. Before you go in to stand up before an audience, check your fly. This is a unisex warning now, but when I started teaching, women did not wear pantsuits. It translated then for us to something like, check the seams in your stockings. We really did wear stockings with seams for everyday wear. It was that long ago. The second maxim, also about advanced planning, is more useful than ever. Most important, however, and it really does apply to much more than teaching, was a third thing he told me. When you're asked a question you can't answer, and believe me, there are still things you don't know. When you're asked a question you can't answer, say so, look it up, and if you're a teacher, tell the class, including where it came from. So the third point was about admitting when you don't know something and then finding out about it. And this is always a good idea. Now I want to say something, just a very small amount, about the changes. That's been mentioned, some of them before here, during my 30 years at York. Now I know that's longer than most of you have been alive, but I was 30 years at York and I'm here to talk about it. Let's start with faculty. I'm going to focus on gender, as I often do. I'm frequently described, was today, as the first woman in political science at York. Now that's not quite accurate. I was preceded by one other woman, the administrative assistant, a wonderful woman who really did run our tiny department of 8 men and me. And it's true, though, that for many years I was the only woman teaching political science at York. Wasn't all bad. Though I was very young and junior, I always get to sit next to any guest of honor. Also, as is not always the case, the men in my department were supportive and rather proud of me. There weren't many women among my colleagues. When York began to get its own faculty, 1960, 5 years before I came, there was exactly one woman among the first group hired. In the mid-60s, my time, women professors were fewer than 1/10, 1 in 10 of the academics in Canadian universities. By contrast, at this university today, about 45% of the faculty are women. That's more than 4 in every 10, in sight of half. And for students, again, there are huge changes. The first graduating class of 1963 had 43 members. 32 of them were men. That's about 3/4, fairly average for the time. This year, there are 810 of you eligible for this convocation. 810 compared to 43. You're not anywhere near all of your year. More than 2/3 of your entire class are women.